Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero, the show that revolutionizes personal engagement in the world and fortification of your life. Let's get to it. We're brought to you by Fox & Sons, foxandsons.com, the best place to get your BBC. I never start my day with anything less than BBC in my mouth, and I suggest if you like BBC, you go to foxandsons.com, get that big bold coffee, and put it in your mouth. foxandsons.com, promo code 0 at checkout for 18% off on any order $25 or more. That's foxandsons.com for that BBC big bold coffee. Put it in your mouth, baby. And the Marc Clair Show. If you enjoyed Marc Clair with Lions of Liberty, you're going to really dig the Marc Clair Show. Marc Clair has gone beyond the realm of politics to dig into the esoteric meaning of life in all sorts of different avenues, whether it be entrepreneurship, ghosts, goblins, Bigfoot, demonic entities, religion. Marc Clair is diving into all of it, and he's not afraid to tackle any task. So go check out the Marc Clair Show. Thank you, as always, Tom Burton, for the music. And you can find this show and many more at the Libertarian Institute.org. That's the Libertarianinstitute.org. That's where you'll find me, Patrick McFarlane, Scott Horton, Keith Knight, Will Porter, Kyle Anzalone, and a host of other writers like Kim Robinson. Go to libertarianinstitute.org and keep track of everything that we are doing for you. All right. I am here with Mr. Adam Patrick once again. What's up, brother?
What's going on, man? Good to be here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's actually really beautiful day here if you stay inside and just look out windows, because it is intensely hot out there.
Are you up in the hundreds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least with the heat index. The other day with the heat index, it was 108.
Dude.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it was like 96 degrees, real feel 108. It was like, oh yeah, so it's 108.
You got any water around you, like lakes or anything?
I got a pond in the back.
You go in it?
I haven't been in it in a long time, but I have before, yes.
Yeah, last time I was in it, it was 15 Bud Lights into the night, and yeah.
No, I've never been a Bud Light drinker.
Sorry. Oh, good man.
Sorry to disappoint you.
What's the Texas beer? What's the one called?
I drink Lone Star, and
Lone
then
Star.
there's Shinerbach.
That's the one.
Then there's Ziegenbach. So there's a few beers that are made in Texas. I think Ziegenbach they sold to Anheuser-Busch.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be a small brewery, but they used to have kind of like a rule that it was only sold in Texas. And so like their slogan was only Texans get it, you know? So
yeah, you might actually be able to help me with this. So I lived in Oklahoma. It was 2003 and 4, maybe something like that. And at that time, I don't know if it's still like this because I haven't been down there in years, but you could only get 3% beer in Oklahoma, whatever blue law they had that was going on there. So we would go down to Texas to get, beer with actual alcohol in it.
Right.
And I remember like the first time I had, I didn't really drink in high school or whatever, kind of a lot of weed at the time, but wasn't really much of a drinker. And I remember the first time I had like 6% beer after 3% beer, and I was drinking Shinerbach, and I was like, this is the most delicious It's just like regular random beer that now I'd be like, yeah, whatever, I'll drink a couple of those. But
Right.
it was like drinking like an 18% or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if Oklahoma still has that law. I remember hearing about that years ago, but I don't know if they still have something like that going on.
Yeah, probably a lot more meth.
Yeah, probably.
A lot of meth.
Maybe that's why everybody does meth. It's because
Probably,
the beer won't get them drunk.
Yeah, you wanted to squash the meth epidemic, just to put some alcohol in your beer and people stop getting their teeth turned green.
Yeah. Well, all right. I wanted to get you on to talk about stuff other than beer, but that's always fun.
Nah, man, it's the whole thing is going to be a review on Southwestern beer.
Oh, geez. Yeah. I think I've like, once I get past Abita, then I've kind of expended my limit.
Turbo Dog, man, that stuff's good.
Yeah, I like the Abita Amber, and then they have the Purple Haze is pretty decent. And what's the other one they have? Andy Gator. I like that one.
I haven't heard of that one. Purple Haze, definitely. I think Turbo Dog is Abita. So I think it's their brown ale. This is basically the only thing I know anything about is the beverage industry. So
Andy Gator is like their dark brew.
Okay.
It's really good. It's like 8% alcohol though. I mean, it's stout. We went out
for the listeners. We're now going to be moving into wine, and then distilled spirits will be the third half of the show. We're going to start with Irish whiskey and then work into peaty Scotch from Islay, and then of course American bourbon, rye. Yeah, that's so. Be prepared. It's going to be a 4.5 hour stream talking about alcohol, which again is the only thing that I like have any knowledge of in the world. So I can only assume that's the time you wanted to talk about with me.
Well, no, we both had an opportunity to have David Gronowski on our shows recently, and some of the subject matter that he brought up, I felt like overlapped well with kind of like my vision for my podcast, as far as like that kind of like personal revolution and like personal responsibility, and then I started reading a book that kind of overlapped with some of the stuff he was saying. So I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit of the discussions that we had with him and some of the stuff I've been reading in this book, and get kind of your thoughts on it, and kind of how you view this stuff, because you're a little bit more of a scholarly thinker than I am. I'm much more like dirt, blue collar, Well, you are, man. You've been in that world, swimming in those books for a long time. So I always learn stuff from you whenever I talk to you.
Yeah, well, it's actually, I'll give the compliment back to you. It's your way of thinking about things sometimes is very, it's spiritual, a little more esoteric, very like, it's a way sometimes where I'm like, shoot, I don't even know if I can even keep up with where Tommy's going with this. So I think it'll be interesting. I did pull the book up on archive.com. I was flipping through a little bit of it today. So yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. So yeah, where did you want to go with it?
All right. Well, I wanted to start off with something that David had mentioned on your show that I thought was very interesting, about Jesus bringing out the best wine at the end of the wedding. And I started thinking about the way that the church views itself as the bride of Christ, and how it's almost like the entire liturgical calendar is a ceremony. Okay. And so it does this year to year, and it just cycles through year to year. And so it's this idea of that wedding, that good wine is still yet to be received. You see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with this?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, how would that play into the cycle of the church here?
Well, because I'm thinking like the analogy used of the wedding and bringing that good wine out at the end of the wedding, similar to the way that David was mentioning, like the progress of the world. But I think we need to look at it more from a liturgical cycle standpoint, not necessarily the progress of the world, because if you read the fathers, one thing that has become clear to me is that we're not to look at time in a linear fashion, right? Like the past, present, and future are all interacting together in concession throughout history. And this is the way that we're to view it. So if we're the good wine coming out, it's a continuous cycle. It continues. The wine just keeps getting better.
You know, did you listen to the most current Lord of Spirits podcast?
I haven't gotten to that one yet.
So I had exactly 3 hours between when I turned it on and this. So actually it's fresh in my mind. And they talked about this a little bit. Now I listened to it I usually have to listen to those things a couple of times for all the information to click in, but they did touch on linear time, and they were talking about the quote unquote stories in scripture, right? Listeners understand what we mean by story, right? It's not made up, but humans process everything in linear time because we kind of have to. But yeah, I think you see a lot of times in patristic writings or, you know, other places in the church that I guess a way of understanding, because we never will fully understand this, you know, God's concept of time is obviously not like that, right? I mean, that's alluded to all over the place, that it's, you know, there are cycles and patterns. I mean, we did an episode on this 2.5, 3 years ago with Joshua from Our Foundation. We talked about cycles and patterns. I know you're super into that stuff. But we process time in a linear way. So there is maybe because of our fallen nature, some disconnect in the way that we process time. We look at how things occur, and the church, especially in the liturgical calendar, is it's constantly repeating, right? It's over and over again, reminding you of the same thing and sort of the eternal generation. But it's also linear, right? It's both.
Yeah, it's more like a spiral.
Linear. Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it, or maybe just like a line, but a line that instead of spiraling into something, or maybe it does. Maybe that's the eschaton is what, you know, we tend to think of spiraling down as being like you're falling out of favor or something bad is happening to you, but maybe it's a spiral up. I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So he goes on to talk, David goes on to talk about not looking to the sky, not having this opaque view of waiting for Christ to come, like to take action, which is something that's touched on in this book, which is kind of what really got my wheels turning on this subject matter. So I think in the West, we have this tradition, culture, I don't know what to call it, of everything being in the mind, like reason being the highest level of understanding that we can get. And I think that a lot of times we miss the point when we're trying to reason our way through things. A lot of times we're missing the point, because the earth was not reasoned into existence, right? Scripture was not reasoned by man. It was revealed. It was a revelatory nature to it, right? And we have to understand that sometimes it's valuable to take a step back and meditate and observe and just be silent and allow those things around you, like the creation, to kind of I wouldn't say speak to you, but to engage with you, and so therefore you get more of an understanding, right? And the reason I'm saying this is because so many people put so much emphasis on their own powers and what they can do, and they don't ever take the time to step back and look for guidance from God and from the sources that he's given us, from the power that he's given us, the divinity that's all around us, right?
Yeah, you know, I think there's a reason for that. And I just recorded with Dr. JT Bridges, who's an evangelical philosophy of science guy. He's a professor and a dean, academic dean at, I can't remember which which seminary it is, or school or something like that. And not to go too much into him, but this is also fresh in my mind because he's strangely enough a Thomist when it comes to philosophy of science, which you don't find in the evangelical world, really, like at all. And it came up a couple times in the conversation. I didn't have him on a debate. We actually went into evolution and some interesting things that he has a very unique way of looking at the world. But by drawing in Thomas Aquinas, he made the point that, you know, arguing in the affirmative for this, that the Western idea of the soul and the body dichotomy, right, that there's only those two pieces to man, results in crazy ideas like absolute divine simplicity, the beatific vision, right, created energies, you know, the creatures in the world that are created by God, or ideas that, you know, we can only get as a sort of like a hologram, or not actually, they don't have the essence energies distinction, the uncreated energies of God that we do in the Orthodox tradition. And so there is this sort of need to reason, that's kind of the only way from that point of view, from that paradigm, that's the only way you can really know anything, is to use human reason. So that's so embedded in the Western Christian tradition that it becomes something like an academic work and not an experiential work. There is really that, and you get the gross like dialectic of this, which would be like Seventh-day Adventist or Pentecostal or something, or, you know, the sort of revived flipping around on the floor, speaking in tongues kind of thing, because there isn't a place for that in the mainstream Western dialectic. And then you also get like pop mysticism apps on your iPhone, you know, like that do kind of what you were just talking about, right? That's the whole, like, go out into nature, you know, commune with the universe, breathing exercises, you know, shit like this, because there isn't a place for that. And of course, in Orthodoxy, we have a Trinitarian conception of human anthropology, right? It's body, soul, and spirit, and that's the noetic, the nous connection to the uncreated energies of God, which is how we experience God in the world. So yes, we do have reason when it comes to something like, you know, I can empirically justify, for the most part, holding this cup of tea in my hand. Obviously, we get a little metaphysical with that. Well, like, is it really there? But for the sake of empiricism, yeah, we have that. We can do natural sciences and things. But when it comes to our connection to the spiritual, that idea is completely lost in the West, and it's influenced everything that goes on in just not just Christianity, but I would argue it's that nominalist sort of William of Ockham, Abelard style, and the rediscovery of Aristotle in Aquinas's time, where the East had always been. If people have read David Bradshaw's book, Aristotle, East and West, it's heady. Like, even from a philosophy guy, like, I had to read it like 3 times to get what he was talking about. But that reason thing is what they pull out of Aristotelian logic and those things. So I would argue that mentality, that paradigm, actually leads you to secularism, atheism. You get Martin Luther's higher criticism, right? Of the people just interpreting things however they want, pulling books out of the Bible whenever they want. But, and I don't want to go too off on a tangent, but this is what leads to an emptiness in the soul itself, right? Because if we believe in the Trinitarian anthropology of human beings, you're going to need to seek that out. There's going to be like a dearth of that in your heart, like the God-shaped hole in your heart that Chesterton talked about. We've talked about for years, right? I think that it's baked into the Western system, and it's incredibly destructive. And so, yeah, it leads people to really weird, goofy ways of kind of processing what could be called the quote unquote spiritual, that are most times probably either at best ineffective or at worst just straight demonic.
Yeah, I'm looking for a quote in here. I thought I'd underline. Kind of characterized. Well, okay, I guess I didn't. There is a quote in here though, and it talks about, I think it was Saint Maximus had said something along the lines that those who depend on the reason of man to witness the glory of God are engaged in darkening their nous. and that they have no ability, that they're limiting their ability to see the uncreated light, which the uncreated, but by witnessing the uncreated light, then that's the stage that leads you to illumination.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. And, you know, I not to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
you also talked about briefly earlier the experience of Christ, right? The sort of, this is a note I took down: Protestants waiting for Christ to come. But that's the idea that in the West, for the most part, there isn't an idea that Christ is here right now, right? That he left and then he's going to come back sometime. And of course, Orthodox Christianity dismisses that entirely. Christ is ruling in the midst of his enemies right now. And so if you don't have that connection to the Most High, that noetic faculty, then you're sort of empty, right? You're sort of like, well, how quick can I get off this earth and get into heaven? It's very Gnostic, right? It's like, how do I shed the body, shed this mortal coil, and, you know, scurry on up to heaven or something like that. And and that lends itself to things like when you ask your random pop Christian or just some dude on the street, like, what happens when you die? And they'll say, well, you go to heaven or hell. And it's like, no, where in Christianity is that ever said, that you die and you go to heaven or hell? That's not a thing at all. Right. It is a thing if you delve into, you know, the medieval Catholic Church. It is a thing if you delve into a lot of Protestant theology. It's there is no concept of Christ here right now. And so how would you, you know, what's the experience of Christ in this world if there is no Christ in this world?
Isn't it interesting that the Romans were so obsessed with the religion of the Jews because they considered the Jewish religion to be solamente,
right?
And that thought has like just followed the West and just remained a Western kind of like thing.
Yeah, that actually, you know, I never really thought about it before, but the Western church fathers all come from that tradition. So I'm not gonna, you know, posit there's a direct parallel there, but it certainly seems like that influence would have been around. That yeah, if you don't, I mean, I'm trying to remember like City of God or some of the things that I read from St. Augustine way back to see if he touched on that. I know he did talk about this world being the world of man, and there didn't seem to be any kind of positive human anthropology in that, but I'd have to go back and look. But yeah, I don't think that's a bad string to tug on, honestly.
So you're talking about you brought up Protestants. We both have kind of touched on looking to the sky, like waiting. In this book, one of the things I underlined, which I thought was very interesting because I did want to touch on this a little bit. He says, we Orthodox are not waiting for the end of history and the end of time. We are running to meet the end of history. Orthodoxy cannot be characterized as the opium of the people precisely because it does not postpone the problem to the future. And it reminded me of the early episodes when you were really starting to dig into Orthodox. You were hammering a lot on the way. And that's what I saw in that, you know, when those paragraphs where those sentences were laid out, it's like the way we're lying out the way.
Yeah. From my recollection, that's from the Didache, and it was essentially early Christianity that's what it called itself.
Wasn't it in Acts as well? Then I want to say it was mentioned.
That is possible. I am not the best at scriptural recall. I've sort of trained myself not to be able to pull verses off the top of my head, as I mentioned before on podcasts.
I could be speaking out of my ass too. So
yeah, it's certainly possible. Yeah, I don't know that for sure. I mean, we could look it up, but it's definitely in the Didache, and it's all over different patristic writings for sure that are referring to that time. So yeah, it's a way of life, right? And it isn't a you know, it every aspect of this so easy yet so difficult. Like the plan is laid out. It's not Gnostic or hidden. It's not like Mormonism where only a few people are at the top are hiding all the information. I mean, it's right there for you to know what to do, but it's every aspect of your life, every action, every interaction. You know, that's really, really hard, especially when you're, you know, for me in my, you know, early 40s, and I haven't lived my life that way ever. Right. You see if you go on, you know, Orthodox social media, it's like all of these really good people who are in the faith. A lot of them are converts, and they're all posting, memes from monks. And it's like, yeah, man, like that's not easy. You just post that on there and you just do it tomorrow. Like that's a hard thing to do. And I think we're not. Oftentimes we're setting ourselves up for failure by thinking that we're supposed to be, or not that we're not supposed to be, but like we're going to be able to just snap into a monastic mindset tomorrow because we read a bunch of books and gone to a year's worth of liturgy. It's like a really difficult thing to do. And also, I'm not called to be a monastic, right? So, that could have been from a catechetical homily, or it could have been, preaching in the monastery. Like I don't always know where a lot of those sources come from, but yeah, it is the way. And so it's unlike the modern Western version of Christianity. It is a lifelong process. I think this is why something like evangelical Protestant circles, the once saved, always saved, born again thing is so appealing because it doesn't require anything of you after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're saved, and then you go out and you talk about Jesus to people and basically just keep doing what you were doing before. And I'm not saying these are bad people or they're watching prawn or, they're like doing drugs or anything, but really it's sort of like, okay, well, I'm just going to go out and preach and just kind of, watch, look at my watch until the end times come, because I know I'm good. Right. We don't have that luxury to just lay back like that. And because we think that's nonsense. Right. So it requires this amount of work from you. And that's why it requires all of this prayer, fasting, experiential, things like the liturgy, like Vespers, it's, you got to go to those things, right? Like you have to pray when you don't want to pray. And we have to admit that sometimes we don't want to. I think we're not honest enough with ourselves, or we have to hold to some kind of like, and I'm not saying this is you, but some kind of like internet piety that, we're the greatest Orthodox Christian mind out there. And, that isn't the way. The way is a lifetime of work through community, through family, through the church. And I think, a lot of the conversations like we have in this little circle, those are really helpful for that, because we all live in different places. Well, not me, you, Buck, and Erickson all kind of live close to each other, but a lot of us don't. And I don't have, like, personally, I don't have Orthodox Christian homies I hang out with on the regular up here, right? Every Christian I know is Orthodox leaning Protestant. Like they tend to be Protestants who sort of live an Orthodox style life. So yeah, it's really difficult to constantly motivate yourself to do that. I mean, so that's why books like the D.K, these things are helpful in showing you what the early Christians were doing in their imitation of Christ. And then the church fathers, who a lot of people don't like to read, or the lives of the saints, like these are examples of people who have been able to do this. And so the more we read about, we might connect with one church father over another, or one saint over another, but that's because, that experience resonates with me. This is what I'm going through. So yeah, no, I think that idea of it being a lifelong process is just, I mean, nothing is a lifelong process in the West, right? Everything is an immediate, immediate gratification right now. And God in the Western tradition is no different. Like, how can I get what do they say in Fight Club? The individual serving friend or something when he's on the plane.
Oh, yeah.
It's sort of like that, but like in a Christian version.
Right. Yeah. So you brought up fasting and prayer and stuff. So I want to touch on this. This is something I had talked to you about last night, and I couldn't find this part of the book, but I thought you would find it very interesting. So I wanted to make sure that we touched on it. So we're getting.
Did we mention what the book was yet?
I don't think so. Orthodox Psychotherapy, the Science of the Fathers.
Right.
Yeah. So Hierotheos Vlachos. I just massacred that name.
I
have no idea how to say his name. That's why I just keep quiet. I'm like, yeah, something like that.
That's the phonetic sounding out of a dumb English guy trying to American guy. No clue if that was correct.
But all right, so he touches on the Orthodox method, and he said ultimately it's not monasticism, it's asceticism that we should be focused on, right? And he defines asceticism as the forceful practice of self-control and love, patience and stillness, which is what got me thinking about standing outside and quiet and just kind of letting the earth be there, kind of letting nature do its thing. the forceful practice of self-control and love, patience and stillness will destroy the passions hidden within us, which is really the ultimate goal for any of us, should be to overcome the passions, to conquer the passions, right? So he mentions there are 5 senses. So the ascetic practices are 5 in number: vigils, study, prayer, self-control, and hesychia. I never can say that word.
No, like, hesychasm?
No, it's hesychia. It's like a hesychast, but the act of being a hesychast.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Different form of the word. Okay, got it.
Right, and I can't pronounce it this way. I don't know why. It drives me crazy. So the senses would connect sight with vigils, hearing with study, smell with prayer, taste with self-control, and touch with hesychia, I guess.
Okay. That works.
I didn't take a Greek course. So he says fasting is privation of food. The privation of food mortifies the body. And St. John of the Ladder writes, to fast is to do violence to nature. It is to do away with whatever pleases the palate. Fasting ends lust, roots out bad thoughts, frees one from evil dreams. Fasting makes for purity of prayer, an enlightened soul, a watchful mind, a deliverance from blindness. He said vigil is like sight. It brings alertness to your own shortcomings. It makes you aware and conscious of them, so that you're constantly like watching them. And prayer heals the disease of the soul. And so he begins all of this by talking about the darkening of the noose. And then he says, this is why we do these things. These things are available to us, and we're gifted to us, we're granted to us by Christ, so that we could utilize them to enlighten the noose, become purified, become illuminated, right? And to get to know Christ. And he goes on to talk about how a spiritual father is a necessity in this process, because your spiritual father is the one who's going to be acting as your doctor through the process of healing the illness of the noose that plagues all mankind.
Yeah, I mean, and that's also, for somebody who's starting out in Orthodoxy, is going to be something that's new to them too, right? The idea of a spiritual father, a guide. In this case, it would be the equivalent of like a therapist, right? Somebody you lay down on the couch and they try to tell you what all your problems are, but of course from a completely different presuppositional metaphysics, right? One that's actually true and actually has an eternality to it. That person might be hard to find for some people too, so I'm thankful that folks can do that. Yeah, it is the kind of thing that, I don't know the church's teaching on how it views the possibility of doing this without a spiritual father, for like folks who maybe can't, for whatever reason, get to contact any, I don't know. I think we're lucky to be able to not have that problem. But yeah, the idea of all these things, every one of those things you mentioned is so completely antithetical to the way anyone in the West lives their lives. Right. It's the opposite of that really is what you see if you turn on any television show and watch.
My favorite part of it is it lays it out so plainly and so easy to understand that it's like, okay, these are the purposes of these things. And it kind of like, for my Western mind, it kind of makes it like tangible. I get it. Like, fasting isn't just the act of fasting. There's a purpose to fasting. So I'm fasting for a reason. Now I can like kind of like balance. Okay, this is why I'm doing this. And this is going to, in the long run, assist in my walk in remaining on the royal path, so to speak.
Yeah, I think we need that as Western people. I mean, I'm just as much of a Western mind as anybody else, but Yeah, we definitely we seek to know the reasons why we have to do something, right? It's maybe shouldn't be that way, but that's just the way that the way I was brought up. I think the church in putting forth books like this and talking about these things is acknowledging that. And I see sometimes an interesting dichotomy playing out online of folks who don't like that. They don't like maybe books like this or the Lord of Spirits podcast or anything that's breaking down anything into analytical terms or explanations of things. It's like, no, it's orthodoxy. Just do it. Just trust it and do it. That's not an incorrect thought to have, right? But for a lot of people, that's just hard to do because we've been burned time and time again by all of these Western philosophies, whether it's libertarianism or atheism or, politics or whatever. It burns you. And so it's kind of like dating, right? If you have 7 or 8 really bad dating experiences, you're like, I think I'm just not going to do this anymore. Right? And then someone teaches you how to actually attract a woman, how to actually like act like a man, right? And you're like, oh, okay, I was doing it wrong this whole time. I was acting like a douchebag. Like, no wonder I was attracting like really shitty potential mates, right? Because I was a really shitty person. So yeah, it's helpful to have it laid out like that. I actually ordered the book, so it should be here tomorrow, just a day too late and $1 short for this conversation.
Well, that's all right. We're only talking about the first chapter right now. So if we want to do something, more expansive on the book, we can. It's just like I said, some of these things overlapped what we were talking about with David, and I just thought it was quite interesting, at least through my lens, the way I viewed it. I was like, oh, I can see how this connects with what he's saying. And it doesn't even mean that he read the book, but there are seeds of truth and reality in what he's saying. And he's onto something. I don't know if he quite understands what he's onto, but he's onto something, and which I really appreciate. And it makes it very interesting to listen to him and his evolution of thought moving forward.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there too. That's worth getting into, and it's I keep using the general we, but most times I'm kind of referring to myself. But I think we tend to, from a philosophical point of view, we tend to approach other people's worldviews, other people's shows, other people's thoughts and conversations through the lens of our own experience and paradigm. And so, if I'll take David Gornowski as an example, if I'm listening to him, a year ago, 5 or 6 episodes, and I'm going, this just kind of sounds like Roman Catholicism repackaged. And that was because I wasn't hearing him talk in the way that I would have said the things he was saying. So it takes some time, I think, to learn. I went, oh, he's an Orthodox Christian. I didn't even know that. So then when we were having the conversation that we had, he and I, looking at it through that lens helped me reorient, because he doesn't talk about what type of Christian he is on the shows that he does.
Right.
Which you mentioned, before we had the conversation, and that's more of a tactical move. I'm not sure if I think that's a good tactical move in and of itself. But it also helped me put into context some of his Rene Girard comments, some of his more libertarian comments that he has, and to be able to judge it better. So, and I think a lot of times that when we're forming judgments about other people's thoughts and ideas, we need to recognize that we're looking at them through our own paradigm, and we might be misinterpreting what they're saying if they are not being 100% forthcoming with their position. And even if they are 100% forthcoming with their position, it still might be hard. We might have to listen to them for 20 or 25 hours to know where they're coming from. So yeah, I think that's a really good point that you brought up.
Yeah, I love to take other people's ideas and see where they're going with them and how they relate. And a lot of times what it happens so often that I'll listen to somebody talk, like I'll listen to a Lord of Spirits, and then I'll pick up a book and I'll see glimmers throughout the text of what they're talking about. And one of the things that I ran into the other day was in one of the reflections from the prologue. I think I sent you the text, but it was talking about praxis and how it's about getting out and doing and engaging, and that is what we're called to do. And something that David Gornowski said was about how you're bringing the second coming of Christ, like by going out there and engaging. And as Christians engage with the world, they're actually manifesting that Christian, that the body of Christ in the world, as the second coming. And that's something that's in this book, Orthodox Psychotherapy, that he touches on there too, is that, I kind of touched on it a little bit in those two sentences where he's like, hey man, like, it's about getting out and moving. Let's do something. It's the way, and I think there are a lot of people that just are so hesitant. I think you brought it up to David that a lot of people don't know what to do. It's like they want to do something, but they're not sure what to do. What am I supposed to do? And I think, the number one thing, and I talked to Charles Haywood about this a while back. Number one thing I think that people need to do is they need to focus on themselves, their prayer lives. And as they become like, begin to walk down this path and to better themselves and to see these improvements within their own life, opportunities will present themselves. And so you're not forcing things and you're not rushing things. But I mean, I can think of moments where I'm at work and I'll be driving down the road and I'll exit, and there'll be some poor homeless guy there, who's talking to himself, trying to bite his own ear, whatever he's doing at the moment. And, at first I'm kind of like, like that initial, like, oh shit, what's wrong with this dude? And then I'm like, then I can experience that kind of prayerful reminder, like, hey man, like, you're told to love these people and to take care of these people. And so if I have a bottle of water or, a sandwich or something in my truck, hey man, come on here, take this, and try to help them out. But it's just that constant reminder. And what I've noticed, and it's one of the craziest things, man, is that when I'm really dedicated and engaged in prayer and fasting and doing it properly with a contrite heart and really moving forward, that my life is a lot smoother. And it's not because there aren't things going on around me that I can't control that would drive me crazy. It's because mentally and emotionally, I'm kind of even kill. I'm there. And it's like I'm moving in the right direction. But as soon as I let a stumbling block get in my way and I kind of stop doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm kind of like go a couple of days without praying, I notice my attitude. I notice things popping back up. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So these things are leveling me out, making a difference in my own life, in my personal relationships with my wife, my coworkers, the people at church. These people can tell that there's something going on. They may not be able to know, oh, you're not praying like you're supposed to, you're not fasting like you're supposed to, but there's this real, at least to me, there's this real obvious kind of like irritability with the outside world whenever I'm just not doing what I'm supposed to do. And I'm internally feeling that kind of like, I would like maybe disgust at myself for letting myself down and not keeping to the commitments that I've made.
Yeah, that's well put. I mean, it's a balancing act is probably not the right word, but maybe keeping a balance between, not going so far off the rails that you are no longer present in the world at all, and then of no help to anyone. And then, removing your, like you said, forgetting prayer, or I woke up late, the alarm didn't go off. Liturgy's half over, like screw it, I just won't go. I'll call Father to apologize, and I'll go to the Bible study on Thursday or something. That does really affect your everything, right? How you look at the world. And what I've noticed over the last just couple of years is a lot of the things that I used to do just for fun, even just listen to music or watch movies or something, like I no longer want to, it's not like evangelical circles where you're kind of sheltered from the world. Like the world is there. A lot of those influences, even just rock music from the 90s that I loved growing up, like I still listen to it, but I don't look at it nostalgic anymore. I look at it as kind of empty and soulless and at best kind of Gnostic. And leading, offering, fixes to relationship problems in a song or something that are just goofy and unhelpful, and that change, I think, is the first part of it. But then again, like I said, not going completely off the rails in one direction or another. That's why it's so helpful to have a spiritual father, so that, the question of, honestly, what do you do when you see a homeless person on the side of the road is kind of an easy one to answer in the moment. But what do you do if on your drive to work every day, there's 25 homeless people on the side of the road, or an entire homeless encampment on the side of the road? Like, there's points at which you're not going to be able to really affect the situation at all. And then you can go to another extreme and be like, well, society is just totally fucked. You know what I mean? Like, how do we even start to reappropriate, recapitulate this society for Christ? I think that's where people like David maybe come in helpful, because they're offering kind of I don't want to say a material way to do it, but like actual tangible things that you could kind of accomplish in the world, because it could be overwhelming is maybe a good word, right? When you look at all of the bullshit that's going on in the world that we live in, it's like, where do I even start, dude? Like, if I gave a $1 to every homeless person I saw driving to New York City or something, I wouldn't have any money left. I'd be homeless. So like, I'm not saying that's not helpful, but maybe that's what I'm called to be, right? But then I have to think about, okay, well, what about the work that we do, like with the stores that we own? What about my family? What about my responsibility to those people? By going completely aesthetic and living on the street with a bunch of homeless people, I'm out hurting other people on the other side of it too, So it can be a little bit debilitating or paralyzing sometimes to kind of know what you're supposed to do. So yes, participation, going to the liturgy, having the spiritual father, reading any information I can grab from anyone's point of view anywhere that's just offering an Orthodox perspective on where there wasn't one before. And psychotherapy, I mean, my mother is essentially a shrink, so I grew up with that. And one of the very first deep dives of reading into some nonfiction that I went down was the history of psychology over the last 200 years or so. And that helped a lot, because modern day psychology is essentially what philosophy was trying to be until it got completely empirical with Hume, and then through like W.B.O. Quine, just kind of abandoning the whole process and turning to essentially to psychology. That I went, this isn't really, I mean, it's not like you can't help people if you're a good therapist, but ultimately you can't provide them what they really need. There is no way for that person to do that. You can help a little bit, but who knows if your quote unquote helping is making things worse. I mean, what is it from that point of view, right? From your like secular atheist therapist point of view, what actually is the reason you're helping people in the first place? What does help even mean? What does it even mean? Right? Like, it's such a weird way to look at the world. And you get this again, like people will shame you for not giving the homeless guy $1. Then they'll shame you for giving him $1, right? It's like, you can't get around this. And so there needs to be a roadmap. There needs to be a way. There needs to be spiritual guidance to help us, because I think that frustration comes from a wanting to do something. Right. Like, and so if you don't know what to do, you're just constantly frustrated, thinking like you're not doing enough. And maybe that does start with, I think it's in tandem, right? You're kind of working on yourself as you're working it out in the world. And it's sort of this feedback loop of, okay, well, this is working, this isn't working, this is working, this isn't working. Through trial and error, that you just make some mistakes and grow over time. But yeah, I mean, there needs to be tangible things we can do. And the problems are so ridiculously overwhelming. You see a lot of people who are just like, destruction to the West, like just burn it all down. And I'm not saying not in the Orthodox sphere, but that's, the accelerationism sort of turn that some of us flirted with a few years ago. It's like, how much longer are we going to allow this degenerate society to perpetuate and continue? But rather than burn it down, I think the suggestion is go out and transform it, go out and be the example, go out and show people that there's a better way to do this. How we do that, I think it's a very individual thing.
Well, and like you said earlier, it's simple, but it's not easy, because as with Metropolitan Hierotheos would say in this book, Orthodox Psychotherapy. So the reason that you're having issues making these discerning what to do in these situations is because the darkening of the noose. The noose has been darkened and continues to be darkened because you're following your bodily passions. So in order to overcome your bodily passions and therefore like bring light unto your noose, you must fast, study, pray, vigil. It's just like, okay, here's the answer. Like, here's why we do these things. This is what these things are for. They have a use. And yes, you have a spiritual father there to help you walk through this and guide you through this stuff in the process. But at the same time, the answers are there. And the spiritual father is there to guide you through utilizing these tools in your life in order to put yourself in a more discerning situation.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's sort of like learning a trade, right? If you were going to learn how to be a car mechanic, you know, you can read a book on how to be a car mechanic, but until you start actually, you know, operating on the car, you're going to, oh, this is what happens when I use this tool. I should have used that tool. And then, or you can just, you know, go to a school where somebody who actually knows how to fix cars shows you all of this stuff. So you get, instead of spending 10 years trying to learn it on your own, you know, you spend 10 weeks and you actually have all of the tools to go out, literally and figuratively, to go out and do the project. So yeah, I think maybe that's missed a lot of times from some folks who don't have in the Orthodox world, who don't have a conception or are, you know, kind of anti the Western mind. I think it's helpful. I think the church, especially if the church is going to grow in the United States, it's going to have to understand this is the mindset it's dealing with, and that books like this or ways of interpreting this or putting that information out there this way is going to be helpful for people. And rather than, you know, just sort of scorn the fact that Western society and Western people are what they are, acknowledge what they are and talk to them where they're at. And this is a helpful way to do that. It's a helpful map, so to speak, to get you to where you want to go.
Yeah. One of the things I've noticed that's kind of bothered me with the online Orthodox community, especially, is kind of I guess it would just be a pride issue, I guess, is what they're dealing with. Ego or pride. I don't know, but it's kind of like you'll have these young Orthodox converts that, you know, probably converted longer ago than I did. So like, I'm not one to like preach to them or anything like that, but you'll hear them talking about Orthodox is the only way. And it's like, yes, but we have to understand what we're saying here, that there are people within the Orthodox Church that are just as corrupt as there are people in the Catholic Church or in evangelical circles, whatever. We're not looking, our goal shouldn't be to demonize those people as opposed to uplift those that are doing the right things, right? And if there's like an evangelical, let's say like this, there's this kid that does this show, Gospel Simplicity, right? He's a Protestant. Interesting show, man. He's an interesting kid. I like watching him sometimes. I don't have an issue with the kid. And like, he's doing the right things. He's engaging and he's curious and he's trying to figure out like, what's the right way? How are we supposed to be doing this? I find that interesting. And I don't see anything wrong with that. And I would never, just because maybe he's a Protestant and I'm not going to like disparage the kid. And it feels like there are a lot of people out there that are willing to do that. And I think we need to find like, there needs to be at least some of us that are willing to be, you know, uplifting towards people and not tearing people down. And I think that leads people like David Gornowski or, you know, like maybe Charles Haywood, they don't want to really get out there and talk about, you know, orthodoxy that much, because it's like now you're getting associated with this ortho bro, you know, kind of like segment, some of which is really good, some of which is really bad, you know, and it's kind of like, I don't know if I want to be tied up in all that stuff.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you from the experience of being involved in many different groups over the years, I'm prone to follow kind of my own path and not get associated with a lot of things, right? Because if you can kind of forge your own way and your own identity outside of these things, and understand these groups exist, listen to their shows, consume their content, but do things just a little bit differently and follow your own path. I mean, Yeah, I think what Austin does on gospel simplicity, he's like a pretty hard guy to dislike, right? I don't think there's any in any religious, flavor anywhere who isn't going to tell you that dude is like the dopest dude ever. And that's a really interesting way to go about it. Yeah, I think there's a place for that. There's there's a place for, clergy like Father Peter Heers, Father Josiah Trenum to kind of give you the raw deal. There's a place for a more analytic type of show like a Lord of Spirits or something, on Ancient Faith Radio. There's also some baggage that comes with all those things too. There's a place for the orthobrosphere, the dire people, right? There's a place for that. And I listen to all of those things, right? And I don't listen to them as, that podcast, that one person is the ultimate truth, right? That soak up all this information and do in combination with all of the things like prayer, fasting, and then in consultation with your spiritual father, learn how to discern and dissect and move all these things to create your own, your own self, because we should be glorifying the fact that we're individual human beings. We're not individualists, but as individuals, we have particular ways that we should go about stuff. I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at mostly. Right. And, being preachy and condescending to people isn't really my thing. Except Mormons. I can be preachy and condescending to Mormons, but not. But I stick with what I know well, and that's, I'm not saying that's the only way to do it. It's just what works for me. But also not like, I'm not a fanboy of any of those things. You're not going to see me like pumping up. As much as I love Lord of Spirits, I'm not going to be posting every episode of Lord of Spirits on my Facebook feed, demanding that people tune into this information. And I think to go back to the original point about folks who are sort of in the orthosphere on social media, sort of being preachy. I don't remember the word that you used. I think some of that is maybe the word is confirmation bias. It's like if I keep putting it out there, I'll convince myself it's true. And sometimes, just posting a picture of your dog is the way to go. Remind people that you're a human being and not like a robot chat AI ortho version, right? Just regurgitating every meme and church father that you can come up with. That's not really probably, even if you're doing that from a purely like, purely well-intentioned point of view, it likely won't be interpreted that way through the lens of social media, just not how people consume content. So yeah, I think some of the humility that you learn over time is that you don't need to, I don't need to express single thought I have in my head at every single moment to everybody on my social media platforms. Like maybe I don't even need to go on social media for a couple days and like, just remember how nice it is to not carry this stupid, electro box around with me everywhere, weighing down my left pocket. And it's so freeing. You realize oh, I don't even need this. I can just go out. Because how do you experience the world if you're constantly tuning into this and not looking out, and like you said, going out into nature, going for hikes, just taking the dog for a walk as opposed to letting them run around the yard. You're moving, you're out there, you're doing something. People need to put the freaking phones down, dude. It's obnoxious. But I was just as guilty of that in the past, like, especially when I was, not really a Christian and running things in the bar restaurant world. I mean, we were doing promos every other night at some bar or restaurant somewhere. It's constant advertising, constant networking, constant keeping in touch with people. And like, ultimately, what does that really do? Especially with no Christian purpose, no real intent. It just becomes like a debaucherous, circle jerk of people who are not really doing anything positive. So yeah, I don't know. It's maybe a rambling answer, but I think just for people who are listening, if you have an immediate, like, this is a thought, this is a great post, I can't wait to share it or repost it or retweet it. Like, give yourself a couple of minutes to decide if you really should do that, because you even with the most pure of intentions, like I said, it might not be interpreted that way on the other end. You might come off as being, full of vainglory or pride or ego. Especially Twitter, dude, because like, every time I go on Twitter, somebody says like the most empirically dumb shit thing I've ever heard in my life. And because I come from a philosophical debate background, even though I try not to do debates, it's like, I have to tell this person how ridiculous this is. And it's like, no, I don't. I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that at all. I didn't even have to look at this. Why I happened to see it. Let's pretend I didn't, and I'll move on with my day. I don't need to get caught up in a 3-day spat with who's probably not even a real person, like saying just spelling things wrong. And there was some guy that said confused essence and energies. So like the way he was using the word energies meant essence, and the way he was using essence meant energies, and he was a Roman Catholic. And I'm like, there's no way I can tell with his avatar and shit if this is even a real person. I'm like, I can't. No, done. Nope, not doing it.
Well, I got two little final questions that I think would be good to kind of finish this subject off with, and it kind of ties into what we were talking about. First off, since you've kind of stumbled headlong into Orthodoxy and have begun engaging, going to church, what is the biggest difference you notice about yourself, about the way you're engaging with the world?
Much less impulsive, for sure. Like I've always been essentially exactly what I just said I didn't like. I have a thought, let's go do it. Right. When it was a cold day in the winter of 2005, and I went, I'm moving to Florida. Right. And I just moved to Florida, like that kind of thing. I want to go out and drink. It's a nice day. Like I never really questioned my impulses because, and that comes from having like good gut instincts on things. Right. So I think what I did is having a really good sense of like human intuition on other people and being able to read people really well. I trusted my gut on that. And so I transferred that way of thinking into trusting my instincts, or we might say passions, right? To trust my passions. And what I realized was, I was trusting them to turn me into a complete asshole. And now I do a lot of stopping and thinking about, not in a paralyzing way where I don't accomplish anything, but even when I'm recording a podcast and I have a guest coming on, it might be a few weeks of researching the person, getting to know them a little bit offline, and not just jumping into the conversation, maybe like I would have 3 years ago, just because they have a name, or, I want to get promo on the show or something like that.
Right.
Music, movies, just traveling. Like my first instinct sometimes to comment on something in real life, or, we're sitting around the dinner table, eating, having fun, and somebody brings something up and I want to respond a certain way. Maybe this isn't the best place, or this isn't the best time. I could talk to them later. For sure, that has been, and that's like the opposite of being, paralyzing. It's been like so peaceful and so freeing. Just to relax and not have to feel like every single thought that pops into my head needs to be continued to its logical conclusion in the next 20 minutes.
Right.
And then what ends up happening is a lot of those thoughts just stop appearing. They don't come anymore. This need to like stay up all night and do X, Y, or Z. It just, I'm gonna go to bed. It's just gone. They're not there anymore.
Yeah, I've noticed much of the same. I'm still not great, but I'm not near as impulsive as I was. I've noticed my temper is not near as bad as it was. I don't get near, like it's a lot more difficult to make me angry today than it was just a year ago.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with that. From my own point of view, like the things that make me angry now are at worst, I'm getting angry because I'm nervous or scared for someone else, their well-being, or, they're coming from a good place, even though it's not a good out. Like I shouldn't be angry, but at least I'm not getting angry over frivolous, ego-driven nonsense of like, no, you're not doing what I want you to do. I'm in control. Right. It's like, I'm scared, like something bad's going to happen to you. Like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that's definitely been, and then hopefully, the idea is that will evolve and change and grow over time, to not having that response at all, and coming up with more productive and constructive ways to, proactively handle those conversations. But that's definitely been a thing for sure.
All right, last question. This is it. This is the one I can't wait to hear. You were Catholic. You've done a lot of reading of Aquinas and a lot deeper study into the Catholic religion. Even in Mormonism, you've read into that quite a bit. I'm sure you've read a lot about Protestantism. When you discovered Orthodoxy and you started reading into it, what was the most surprising thing about it that you were like, holy shit, this is never, I didn't even know this was a thing?
So there's a broad answer to that question. And the broad answer is that all of the things that seemed confusing to me about Roman Catholicism and Protestantism, and I do realize there's many different types of Protestants, and they don't like when you group them all into one thing. But just as a general way of talking, that all of the things that I found weird or goofy or unanswerable or theologically incomplete, within like 6 months, Orthodox Christianity answered and alleviated all of those things, right? It was like almost right away, because that's basically what happened was, so I don't remember who it was that mentioned it originally, whether it was Vin or Bad. I don't really remember how it landed on my radar, but I went into like critique mode, right? Like, oh, I'm just going to smash this one down too, right? I'm going to find all the flaws with this one, the same way I found it with Catholicism and Protestantism. And nah, man, I got slapped right quick, right? Like that stuff's not there. There aren't problems with it. It's logically complete. It's spiritually complete. And this is from like a strictly kind of philosophical, almost secular level, that I was trying to find all the holes. And what I ended up doing was logicking myself into it, right? Like, I can't not believe this now. Like, somebody asked me, it wasn't on air, it was somebody maybe on the phone or something, like, could I be convinced of something other than Orthodox Christianity as a metaphysical paradigm, as a worldview? And I went, yeah, if you could offer me something that explained the entirety of reality the way that this does, and or more, then yeah, sure. But I don't think that's going to happen, man. And if you can, more power to you. We'll go ahead and do that. But I mean, there's just the explanation of everything in reality, and the fixing of all of the problems, or maybe the preemptive, not having problems in the first place, since it's 2,000-year-old religion, right? Yeah, that was really, really amazing. It was, I don't know how many people logic themselves into a paradigm, but it was fascinating. I couldn't believe it. And it didn't take very long either. It took about 6 months for me to be convinced. And then I just was like, all right, man, this is me. This is what I'm going to do from forever now. Yeah. As far as a specific thing, I don't know. I'd have to really think about that, but that would be my broad answer for sure.
Yeah. Well, all right, man, plug whatever you got.
Yeah. So the Age of Information, you can go to theageofinformation.com, theageof_info on YouTube. That seems to be about half the traffic now that we started really putting shows out again this year. Any podcatcher, I think we call them people still call them podcatchers, whatever app you listen to audio stuff on, it should be on there. As long as they allow podcasts. Leave ratings, reviews. We love comments on YouTube. I haven't quite figured out. I mean, I know how to produce a show and put it on YouTube, but I haven't quite figured out why some get, 2,000 views and some get 200 views and some get, 200 views and 15 comments. Some get 1,000 views and no comment. Like, I don't know what people are doing, but we definitely promote conversation. And for anybody who's emailed me at adam@theageofinformation.com or message me on Facebook, I'll talk to you, man. Like, if you're a real person and you're genuine, and you want to hop on the phone, we can get on an app like WhatsApp or something and chat on the phone. Or I've done that numerous times with people over email, gotten to know. That's how I met Jeremy. We did the podcast on Mormonism with through Jim Bob. I met him through that, and then we got on the phone and we were just talking like for a few weeks and decided to do a show. So, that's my way of trying to meet people and communicate. And yeah, go ahead, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and let's try to do something with this community and not just have this information, floating out there for no reason. So support people like Tommy, support people like Buck Johnson, Matt Erickson, like these people who are all, coming at this from their own points of view. They're all wonderful people. And Tommy, I always enjoy having a conversation with you, especially after the rough couple of days that I had. It's like, now lulling me into a sense of peace so I can actually lay down and relax. So you're always good for calming someone down and having a really great conversation.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm sorry about all the throat clearing, man. I had a really rough day outside and my throat is just killing me. It's like just phlegm, I don't know. It's just driving me crazy.
I recommend this. I think it's peach ginger Rubio's tea with like chamomile in it. And I drink them now like usually right before I do podcasts, and they help a lot with that. Especially during the Canadian Doobie Death Cloud that we had a couple weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
That weird. It was like the end of the world, like the surface of Mars over here. Dude. I couldn't believe it. And my dumb butt was like, I'm going to go out and do some yard work. And it's not that big deal. And I've smoked cigarettes in the past. Like, how bad could it be? It's when the air quality is at 300 or 400, whatever, that don't go outside and do yard work. That's the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. So yeah, no, I feel you, man.
Yeah. Well, all right. I'm going to stop the recording here.